You know, there's a lot of guns that can get you in trouble, including the one that I'm holding here, and that's what we're going to talk about today as I give you 7 guns that could land you in prison. And what I tried to do is put together a list of certain guns and scenarios involving guns that could actually get you in trouble for possessing these firearms, and try to give you a way in some of these cases to actually own them legally so you don't get yourself in trouble. Now, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not giving you any kind of legal advice, I'm just giving you my opinion on what I know about certain situations. And of course, I want to hear from y'all if you've ever run across any of these situations that I'm going to talk about or any of these guns. What did you do in that case? Or if one of these things like really surprised you and you're like, man, I had no idea, leave me a comment down below. Of course, I want to hear from the community because that's why I make these videos, not for myself. I make them for you. So let me know what you think down below. And of course, if you like what I do, consider subscribing. You could also join us on Patreon or join the channel right here, gain access to some pretty cool perks, and help us continue to make the videos that we are doing here currently. Big thanks to you guys. Let's go and get started. Now I'm going to get to this gun in a minute because this is really interesting. But the first one I want to talk about is, let's say you have a relative that passes and they have a collection of guns. Well, the first thing you want to do is establish who has the right to go through this relative's possessions that has passed. You know, if that's you and you've already set that up or you know that, perfect. Now we need to secure the guns that are in the home. Keep in mind that most break-ins happen early in the morning, typically between 10 and 12, according to statistics, which actually makes sense because that's when a lot of people are already at work. One thing criminals don't want to do is they don't want to have resistance when they're trying to commit a crime. So why would they realistically break in at night? At nighttime, you'll see a lot of like car break-ins because again, people are asleep. So they're going to take the advantage and try to, you know, open up vehicles and stuff. But when it comes to your home, typically these things happen in the morning. So now you potentially have an unoccupied home where there's firearms. So we need to get those things secured. Now, if your relative that passed had a a heavy duty safe, it's bolted to the ground, maybe the security system is still operating and you feel okay with that, that may be sufficient for you. Me personally, if that were to ever happen to me, I would get them in my possession because I know I'm at the home. That's not something I would just want to leave around because one of the things I don't want to do is I don't want to arm criminals, and criminals will go to great lengths to steal, especially valuables like firearms. So let's say you're like, oh, well, I can't keep them at my home, and I definitely don't want to keep them at my relative's home. You know, they're not there anymore. You could take them to an FFL. So if you know, you have a good relationship with a shop near you, or even if you don't, you could call them and tell them what's going on. They could take possession of the guns for you. They might charge you a fee, maybe they won't. Or a storage fee or something. I have no idea. But the point is, we want to get those things secured. Then from there, this is really state specific. So you may end up having to do a transfer. So you got to go through the FFL, do a 4473, and then those guns are transferred to you. Whatever the transfer fee may be, you know, at the gun shop or FFL that you're doing it, that's just something that you would have to pay. In other states, more free states, you may not have to do that at all. Okay, if you are able to legally own guns, then you can actually take possession of those guns as long as you have the right to them. Now, of course, there's some situations where family members may not be into guns, and that's unfortunate because sometimes you'll see those guns actually get turned in and potentially destroyed, which is just it's awful, you know what I mean? So hopefully that's not the case. If you are so like against guns and you have somebody that's passed and they had a bunch of guns and you don't feel comfortable with it, I mean, you could always give them to an FFL. The FFL could maybe sell them for you. I know, I have a gun shop that does consignments, and then you could, get some money off of them like that if you really wanted to, if you have no need for them or you don't feel comfortable with them, whatever the case may be, last option for sure is taking them and having them destroyed or turning them into police departments, things like that. Honestly, it's not going to help anybody. You could have people that actually enjoy them, and you can make money off them at the same time. But these estate sales and, relatives that have passed that have had firearms, if they've had things in their will or had trust done, hopefully they do, and that will make that process much easier as to who those guns go to. But again, you're talking about really valuable items, and at the same time, you don't want to arm criminals, and you also, if you want to take possession, you want to do it the right way and not get yourself in trouble by doing that. Now, another part to this that I want to talk about that is totally separate is if your relative owns any kind of NFA items. So that includes machine guns, silencers, short barrel rifles, short barrel shotguns, any other weapons, that kind of thing. At this point now, things have changed a little bit. Now, one area I'm not totally clear on, and this is where I'd really love to hear from anybody that has experience with this, but let's say your relative that has passed has a pre-1986 machine gun. If they did a tax stamp on it, as far as I know, all you would have to do is then do a Form 4, and you would then pay the tax stamp on that. Now, how you go from individual, being your deceased loved one, or power of attorney to you, probably is the way to go, because then you would have to, if you do it the other way, then you could transfer it to an FFL. That transfer time between the power of attorney to the FFL there's a waiting period obviously there. I don't know if it'll be as long as it would be from, FFL to individual, but it seems to me, from what I understand, that you actually have 2 waiting periods there to take possession of that. So you're talking, at least a year, if not a year and a half, in order to take possession of that item. Now, that's a fantastic scenario if they did a tax stamp. If they don't have a tax stamp, let's say you look everywhere for this thing. This is really important because you got to think pre-1986 transferable machine guns are worth a buttload of money. Plus, they have significance to you. Maybe your grandfather, whoever it is a World War II veteran. Well, again, that is such a significant weapon that is attached to your family history, and the last thing you want to do is have that thing taken away. So let's say you scour, you're looking for this tax stamp, you can't find it. You could call the ATF, ask them if they could get you a copy of this tax stamp. They could say, yeah, absolutely. Or they could say, well, it never had a tax stamp. Are you in possession of this gun? In that case, they may come get it, or you may have to turn it in. So you really got to be careful with things like that, because if you just take it, and there's no tax stamp, it's not transferred back to you, you could get in a buttload of trouble. Now, again, I know there's some gray area there, so anybody that, again, has been through this and had to deal with this with a past relative, if you're willing to share, let us know down below, man. I'd love to actually see some of these examples or hear about them in real life. And then, of course, if it is after 1986, which you can be in possession of, you would, though, have to have an FFL and an SOT, even if you're the trustee, I believe. So there is some additional steps you would have to have for post-1986 machine guns, silencers, short barrel rifles. It applies to all of that stuff. So you really want to pay special attention, especially to all your NFA items. Now, this next one I want to talk about really doesn't apply to my community or the gun community, especially here on YouTube, really at all, but it is something I wanted to throw out there because this gun right here could land you in prison. Now, you may be thinking, well, how is that? Well, this is a prop gun of a Walther P38, and they actually did a pretty good job from the sights to the hammer. They even got the Bakelite style grips on there, heel style mag release, trigger, safety, everything. It's even heavy, kind of like the P38. Rattles like the P38, but the ejector and the sear and all that stuff in there. So anyways, it's just a prop gun though. It'll never fire a real round. But if you were to use this in a crime, in the commission of a crime, you would face the same charges as somebody that had a real firearm. Or if you have something that looks like a firearm, but it's not even like real, like close to real like this is, same rules apply. Now there may be other, I forget what they call them, like accelerators, or it's like kind of like special circumstances on top of the crime itself. Some of those things may not apply to you because it's not technically a weapon, but the main crime itself, you absolutely can be charged no matter if you're using something like this or an airsoft gun. Airsoft guns, with a can of paint, or just even straight from the factory sometimes look like the real thing. So yes, fake guns, BB guns, airsoft, prop guns, all can land you in prison if you commit crimes with them. Now here's another interesting way that you could find yourself in prison. If you have this and this, it could actually land you in jail. So this is a pretty old concept. So essentially, back to the flintlock days, guys have been trying to figure out a way where they could get better accuracy out of their pistols for longer shots. And for the longest time, this is what they used. So this is a shoulder stock and holster combo. It's been used with the Borchardt pistol, which was like the first successful semi-auto gun. Came with one of these. The Mauser, probably the best example. The 1911 at one point, the Lugers, the FN High Powers, all of them basically, or a lot of them, had the ability to attach this shoulder stock by putting a small groove in the back of the grip. Now, I think there were some other ways that some companies may have attached it, but this is the most common way that I know of. And so essentially, we could use this as a holster. It actually does have a belt clip. All right, so we could holster it just like that. All right, we could attach it to our belt, but if we needed to use it as an SBR, essentially is what this whole thing came down to, we could then take this and attach it just like that. Now we have ourselves a little carbine. Here's the problem though. Let's say you have an original Mauser, okay? 1912 or whenever the year, this one's a 1912. World War I, whatever. Totally fine. But you buy a reproduction stock like this. Well, once you go to attach it, you have now turned yourself into a brand new felon. Or let's say you have an original stock and then a reproduction Mauser. Again, if you attach those things, the ATF considers that an SBR. Is it absolutely asinine? Yes, I agree 100%. But I'm just telling you the facts of what could happen if you attach these two things. Here's how you skip that altogether. If these are from the same time period, then you're good to go. So, fortunately, these do match. Actually, the numbers match on these. I ended up buying these from a local friend of mine and got it at a really awesome deal. And like I said, this one's from 1912. But regardless, as long as these things are from about the same time period, then you're good to go. If not, you definitely want to keep them separate or just throw this in the holster and just use it for that purpose alone. Now, after World War II, the concept of this really started to die off, and during World War II, they really they stopped putting these slots in the grips. These are really uncomfortable to carry around, not that practical to use, and you're just taking up extra, and let's be honest, precious time, manufacturing this slot back here for something that's not going to be used. And so that's during World War II. After World War II, things like this have been tried since then. The HK VP70, I think it's the M series maybe, the Beretta 93, R series, something like that. I may have those two things switch around, but regardless, both of those pistols try to utilize a stock setup where the stock would then, fold out from the pistol and give you a little bit better accuracy. You have like the, what is it, the Ronin series for like Glocks and Smith and Wessons. You even have the B&T, which is called the UWS, which is a pretty interesting gun. It actually looks like a full-size handgun, but in the matter of seconds, you can deploy this shoulder stock on it. Now, of course, this is going to fall under ATF or NFA, and so you will have to do special paperwork to own something like that. Fortunately, this one is outside of the scope of that. It's well over 100 years old now at this point, so no worries there. But it is one special consideration that you want to keep in mind. Anytime you add a stock to a pistol, especially if it's a newer gun, it's going to be illegal anyways. I'm about to talk more about that here in a minute. But also, you just want to be really careful with these older designs where you think this may be perfectly legal, and maybe it is. But if you have a reproduction stock, and again, a lot of these look like they're super old, but they could be a new production stock, you got to be really careful with stuff like this. Now, the next thing I want to talk about are the murky waters that involve pistols and braces and stocks and grips and all this kind of stuff, because inevitably you will run into this, and if you're not careful, you can turn yourself into a felon really quickly. All right, now let's take the CZ Bren 2 MS, okay? I have a pistol brace on here. Now, there's a nationwide injunction right now, so owning pistol braces, totally fine. You know, FPC started this last year with the injunction for their members, then GOA, and then NRA, and then, you know, other companies started jumping on. SB Tactical has been really prominent in this kind of fight against this scare tactic, which is what I call it now, okay? But anyways, I take this pistol brace, I put it on my pistol, totally fine. If I go online and I buy a stock for a CZ Bren 2 and I put it on the same gun or whatever kind of stock, it may look like this brace, but it's considered a stock, okay? There are differences there, but let's say it looks like this one, right? And I put that stock on this pistol, guess what? I am now a felon. Now you may be thinking, well, there has to be some kind of like special way to order these things. Like you have to have a tax stamp in order to order it. Well, you have to have a tax stamp. You have to have an approved tax stamp before you can add that part. But as far as getting the stock itself, you can absolutely do that without any additional paperwork. So there's a lot of people out there that may not know as much about this, and they may say, well, I don't know if I really like the brace. I like this stock though, and I'm gonna put this stock on here, and then find themselves in hot water. Let's say you take the same pistol and you're like, okay, now I want to put a vertical grip on here. Yeah, I've seen guys on the internet and they all had them. Well, maybe that's true, but anytime any YouTuber that doesn't want to get themselves into trouble, if they have a vertical grip on a pistol, then they have the special licenses in order to do that. An angled foregrip like what you see right here, no problem at all. But again, if you put a vertical grip on there, now the ATF considers that in possession of a short barrel rifle. So those are things to keep in mind. Now, I talked about the Meta Tactical when we were going over the stocked pistols, right? That pistol, 5-inch barrel, M&P metal, whatever, on its own, it's fine. If I take a 16-inch or 16.5-inch barrel from the Meta Tactical Apex, and now I take this pistol and I turn it into like a bullpup pistol or bullpup PCC, which is really what it's become. Is there an issue with that? Absolutely not. But going the other way, you best believe that is a serious problem. So if I take, I don't know, this spear right here, and I put a 13-inch barrel on it, and I don't do the paperwork, fill out the correct form, pay my tax stamp, wait the time, I'm in possession illegally of an SBR at this point. So you really got to be careful. You got to know the things that you're doing to your gun. Everybody likes to do modifications to some extent, but when you do these things, you really have to be careful and know in your state specifically and know the federal laws around all this stuff. I don't agree with it. I hope eventually all NFA items are removed and that it just becomes a memory at some point in time. But for right now, you really got to follow those things because you could land yourself in prison and not even know it. The next gun that can land you in prison is your concealed carry. Now, in every state, there's going to be places where you can't carry. This is typically going to be courthouses and police stations and schools and other places like that. Okay, there's also going to be some establishments that will make that decision and then have to abide by the laws as far as having a sign that says no concealed weapons allowed, and that sign has to be a certain size, a certain distance off the ground, so that it is completely visible and there's no chance of missing it. But also traveling across state lines can dictate, whether you can carry in your given state or not. So there's a lot of talk about constitutional carry right now. South Carolina became the most recent state to finally pass this. And there's like questions of, well, now that I have constitutional carry, let's say in South Carolina, Tennessee, and Georgia also have that, can I carry into those states now? Well, if you're not a resident and you don't have a CWP, you have no reciprocity with those other states, okay? So, there's out-of-state permits and, for out-of-state residents and all of that kind of stuff or whatever, but just having constitutional carry on its own doesn't give you the right to carry in the other 28 states that now have that. It's a little bit unfortunate when you think about it because you still have to get a CWP in order to have reciprocity with these other states. So it still kind of makes it worth it actually to go through the process and get that CWP. But fortunately, a lot of those states make those classes free or, very little money. On its surface, I've talked about this in a recent video, constitutional carry is fantastic. It is in my opinion, it is a great thing for pushing freedoms further and in the right direction instead of stripping freedom. So I really agree with it. It's just, again, unfortunate that now you can't really carry into a neighboring state, but you really couldn't do that before. If you didn't go and get your CWP before that, you really couldn't do that anyways. So it's just kind of one of those things. You have to be mindful of where you can carry and, when you can carry, what state you can carry, if you have reciprocity. All of these things really matter. Now, on a federal level, you actually have to be 21 to own a handgun, but you can utilize constitutional carry at 18 in some of these states or 19 in one of the states, but you can't buy a handgun until you're 21. So this basically means like if your dad, gifted you a handgun on your 18th birthday or whatever, you could be in possession of that legally, and then of course you could carry it, and then when you're 21, then you could buy your own. So a lot of different things go into it. It is super beneficial to look at a reciprocity map if you have a CWP and just look at your states that you frequently travel and kind of know at least the basic laws of what concealed carry is in those states. Whether you have to keep your firearm in a glove compartment or in the center console or in constitutional carry states, some or at least some of them. I know South Carolina is like this now. You can pretty much have that gun anywhere within reach, open or concealed inside of the car. So a lot of things to keep in mind. If you don't follow those rules and you slip up, you get pulled over, things like that, then depending upon the officer and all of that kind of stuff, it could land you in a lot of trouble. And the last thing I want to talk about is the lower receiver for your ARs. So it's really popular to kind of buy these lowers and then build them out to a rifle or a pistol, in pretty much any configuration that you want. I mean, there's a multitude of colors and different build qualities, whether that's polymer or 7076, aluminum, forged, whatever. The whole point is, and probably one of the most important things to keep in mind, is that this is the firearm, right? So this is what you're going to fill out your 4473 on. Everything else, according to the ATF, is insignificant. This serialized part down here is the most important part. That's what you're going to have to fill out your paperwork for. So whether you buy just the lower or you buy a complete rifle, or maybe you buy a lower with the stock already attached, this is what you will do your paperwork on. So with that in mind, let's say you buy this complete gun, right? Well, it's listed as a rifle. Now, in theory, you could take this lower and you could actually turn this into a pistol, but you do so at your own potential peril, because then you would be a felon. Well, what happens if I just buy the lower and then I want to turn it into a rifle? Well, you could do that too. But once you turn it into a rifle, legally, it can't be turned back into anything other than a rifle. So the most common way to do this, and maybe one of the best practices that you could do, is actually, if you're just going to buy a lower, build it out as a pistol first, and then if your state has any kind of registry and they make you mark it, whether it's pistol or rifle, mark it as a pistol. And then that way you could turn it into a rifle, or you could bring it back into a pistol configuration. Once you make it into a rifle, technically, legally speaking, it can't be anything other than a rifle from the moment you do it to the end of this rifle's life. So these are 7 guns that could land you in prison. And of course, I want to hear from y'all. Are there any of these examples that you were like, man, this actually really did surprise me? Or maybe you think, all of these things are really dumb and you should be able to do whatever you want. Of course, there's going to be a lot of people that agree with that, and I am one of them. But unfortunately, these are things that I want you guys to be aware of. And again, I'm not a lawyer, but I don't want good, law-abiding gun owners becoming felons and not even knowing what they're doing could actually be wrong. So that's why I make these videos. And of course, if you guys like this, I will make continuous parts to this same concept. If you like what I do, check out one of the other 600 plus videos I have on the channel related to firearms. And of course, if you want to support us, you could do that through Patreon, or you could join the channel right here, become a part of the community, and support what we do. Big thanks to you guys. See you in the next one. And as always, hold them down.